Welcome everyone to Northwest Digital News. I'm Kevin Hunter with Kyle Torgerson, and today is our fantastic show with Jody Summers out of Northern California, talking about health and wellness. Welcome, Jody. Glad to have you back.
It's nice to be here again.
Well, we're going to talk about a continued conversation about cholesterol today. And today we'll focus on really the benefits of cholesterol, which there are many. But before we do that, for those of people who may have missed the first broadcast, if you would, Jody, capture what cholesterol is and how it's produced and why it's produced in the human body.
Absolutely. So, for many years we've heard about, keeping cholesterol levels down and all of those things and how bad it is. But really, it's pretty important. In fact, it's so important that we get it from two sources. One, we can get it from food, which is mainly what we hear about. But the vast majority of cholesterol in our body is made by our own body in the liver. And there are many what we call essential nutrients. And an essential nutrient is something that you need to actually get outside and take in, like vitamin C. If you don't eat vitamin C, you can become vitamin C deficient because your body doesn't make it. But cholesterol is even more important, so important that our body knows that it absolutely even has to make it. It's that vital that it's not even essential. We don't need to even eat it because our body knows it's so important for all sorts of functions that we're going to talk about today that it manufactures its own. That's how important cholesterol is to our body.
So when somebody looks at a food product on the shelf that says no cholesterol and they think they're doing this great thing by eliminating cholesterol, first of all, that's wrong thinking. But secondly, doesn't matter if we're eating it or not, our body's going to make it.
Exactly right.
Very good. Okay, so is there anything else you want to share as far as like background of cholesterol before we get into the benefit side of it?
Because I'm sure we can bring it up during each part of the benefits, because in each one there's kind of marketing of how come it's bad, but I'll show you how come it's really not bad.
Now, is it not true, before we get into this, is it not true that there are populations of people all around the world who have different diets than we have here in the States, but despite elevated cholesterol levels, have very low or non-existent incidences of heart disease or stroke, or those things that are commonly associated with high cholesterol levels?
Absolutely. And I think I talked to so many people. I think last week we talked a little bit about this in depth, but in a nutshell, those populations with very high cholesterol levels tend to also have very low intake of processed foods and sugars and bad fats, which are unstable fats that cause inflammation in the body. So when we look at how cholesterol has been marketed to us in the last couple of decades, it's under the banner of heart disease. And, we talked about last week, and I'll give the exact same example of firefighters. If you have somebody who has blockage in their heart and there is cholesterol buildup, there's no doubt about it. You go and you can see it. The cholesterol, when you have an artery, they're usually at the bends of that artery. They can get inflamed from processed food, standard American diet, high fructose corn syrup, all of those things that we're eating, bad oils and bad fats, cause systemic inflammation. And in fact, I think I forgot to mention this last week, but if you go to the American Diabetic Association, there is a little note it kind of hidden down underneath that high insulin levels and high blood sugar levels are what they think now is the #1 cause of heart disease, not cholesterol, because it causes this inflammation. And the cholesterol is actually like the firefighter that comes and tries to reduce the inflammation, and that's why it builds up. But it's like if you were an alien from another country or another planet and coming down to look and seeing fires, you would see firefighters at all of these forest fires and house fires, and you would wrongly assume that the firefighters are the problem, but really firefighters are not the problem. They're actually helping try to calm down this fire, which is like inflammation in our body.
Correct. Yeah, that's a lovely analogy, and it explains perfectly why cholesterol then can become a problem, but it's resulting from other issues. So let's talk about some of the benefits of cholesterol. There are many to the body. But let's just start with number one. You mentioned this morning, as we were getting started here, the benefits to cell membranes. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So our cells all have different parts, and one of the most important parts is the cell membrane is actually holds the integrity of that cell, and it is all made with cholesterol. I mean, there's other fats in there too, but it's a fat soluble membrane, and it's very high in cholesterol. And one of my fabulous, I've heard her speak several times, and just a hero in my book, excuse me, her name is Dr. Terry Walls, and she, I think, was a medical doctor out of the Cleveland Clinic, and she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and she ended up having to give up her practice because she was starting to work out of her wheelchair, but then got so bad that she was literally bedbound. And she did, as a medical doctor, she did some studying of maybe, because she was taking the top-notch drugs for multiple sclerosis, and it's getting worse and worse, and her symptoms were getting worse. But she studied about the cell membrane. And if you really want to look at some great research, she has done some things. I believe the book is called The Walls Protocol. It's specific to multiple sclerosis, but the point of the cell membranes, she really expands in there. And it is so important for things like autoimmune issues, multiple sclerosis, all of those healthy brain developments, little children who have, you know, metabolic diseases, all of those things need cholesterol for healthy cell function.
There's a to your point about how vital cholesterol is to cell production and healthy cells, is that Dr. Jerry Tennant is a guy that I've done a fair amount of study on, and I could post this link. Maybe I'll shoot this over to Kyle so we could post this in the thread here. But he goes into actually talking about how many pounds of fat each of the various organs need as they're going through their recycling or regeneration process. It's like, and then, you know, his question at the end of all of this is, do you think you're eating enough of the good fats? But the point is if you're looking at this and you're saying, oh, wow, my liver needs X amount of fat in order to be healthy. My brain needs X amount of fat in order to be healthy. And then you just go down this list and you start going, wait a minute, why am I cutting fat out of my diet again? So
and again, you look at mother's breast milk, it is rich in cholesterol, because those babies, when their organs are growing, and they need that, they need more even from their food than their body makes. That's how important it is.
Yeah, and at that critical stage of growth, and having that proper amount of fat to allow that cell growth to happen at the pace that it's happening at. I was kind of curious a number of years ago, because I had a doctor tell me one time that a young baby, especially the infant, so once they get to like 6 months old or a year old, that rapid cell growth has already slowed down substantially. But he shared with me that the number was somewhere around 10 times or 20 times faster cell development, healthy cell development, than adults have. And so I was just kind of curious, and I had taken my son's weight when he was born and took his weight and height again when he was 6 months. And then whatever that percentage was, I just kept adding it to his, every 6 months, that percentage would increase by that amount. And by the time I got to age 12, he was like 450 feet tall and would have weighed somewhere around 2,000 tons. So it was like, so that just gave me a little idea how fast he's growing. But you're right, fat being so critical to that development at a young age. Kyle.
Can I make a plug here?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you're pregnant, and especially that last part, that's when the baby really grows. Well, they do the whole time. But taking and supplementing with a good quality cod liver oil is really good for that baby's brain health and cell health, especially if you're not already getting a good amount of fat in the diet. Cod liver oil is fabulous for, always check with your doctor, but cod liver oil is very, very good for babies, in utero, as well as brand new babies. So
Kyle had a point.
So we have a question from Renee Kerr. So is the keto diet beneficial?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question, Renee. It can be. It can be so there's a keto that is what you can have a junk food keto. And I guess that's really, I see it a lot. And that is if all people are eating is non-healthy fats, nothing but bacon and heavy meats and that kind of thing, you can have a junk food keto diet, and that is not good. In fact, it may even be worse. There is, however, a very whole food, vegetable rich with healthy fats type of keto approach that might be good for a lot of people. Again, I don't make specific recommendations, but I can pretty much say that I do see a lot of people doing keto that is really not healthy, not getting the number of really rich, cruciferous vegetables, leafy greens, healthy fruits, that kind of stuff, and really eating just junk food keto. And that's no better than any other standard American diet. So the answer is it can be healthy as long as it's done right.
To a point that you made, probably a month or so ago when we were talking about the difference between good quality carbs versus low quality carbs, good quality fats versus low quality fats, good quality proteins versus low quality proteins. The quality of the food dictates whether keto is beneficial to you or not.
And I don't see that a lot. I see a lot of just do this or don't do that, but it comes back to quality. That's effective.
Very good. Well, cell membranes, we visited about that a little bit. Hormones, which our body produces for all kinds of various functions. There are so many people who are either having hormone therapy or supplementing with hormones or just being out of whack on a number of different levels because of hormones. I see this a lot, in particular in the younger generation, who are having all kinds of very obvious health complications, one of them being complexions and things like that. So talk a bit about healthy hormones and how vital cholesterol is to that.
Honestly, I think if I could pick two on this list, there's 6 things. This would be one of the 2 I don't know, they're all important, but health. So cholesterol is needed for that hormone stabilization. Because all of those fat soluble vitamins are also dependent upon cholesterol. So for example, vitamin D, we say it's a vitamin, but it's really a hormone. It is not really a vitamin. And you can get it from the sun. Yes, you can get it, you can take it, a supplement, but the best source is sunlight. And that is a hormone. All of those, when they're out of balance. So if your cholesterol, if you don't have healthy, good, stable cholesterol levels at the right amounts, your hormones are in that same balance. So we see these kids, like you said, especially these teenagers, eating, chips for breakfast and cereal and, low fat or skim milk or all of those things. And we wonder why they're out of balance and why their hormones are up and down and up and down. And it's because the foundation of the way their body makes those hormones is out of balance. And it goes back to healthy cholesterol levels.
Well, you can't start your day with Captain Crunch and hit noontime with boxed mac and cheese and then, have some hot dogs and canned Hormel chili at the end of the day and think your hormone production is going to be okay. It's not going to happen.
Can I make a mention? I was talking with somebody this week who it doesn't matter who she is. She works for a school district and she works in the cafeteria, and we were talking about kids' food, and she said, oh yeah, but my school district really has good, healthy lunches. So I thought, I wonder what she considers a healthy lunch. So I went to her school district, and I don't know which school she works at, but I randomly picked one of the schools you can access what's on their menu. And I looked at the breakfast menu for that same school. Literally, the breakfast menu, I will send it to you when we're done here, had 0 choice for health food, none. There wasn't even one option for children to choose. And I know the argument is they don't choose the healthy thing, but in this case, they didn't even have. There was cereal, pancake, muffins, juices. There was sausage a couple of days a week, but again, I don't think it was probably organic. It probably had a lot of, it was probably industrial raised, which, it brings a whole issue of itself. There were no eggs. There was no healthy fats and no quality proteins anywhere on a month's list of menus. Mm-hmm. None. And we wonder why those kids are having problems in school. And that's how they start their day. I was taken aback how bad it was.
You mentioned in your comments about fat-soluble vitamins, and vitamin D being one of them, and several others. We also, I'm just put this in the back of your mind so that we can get to this before we're done here. But Alan Keown has asked a question online. Says, "I'm late to the party, but what about cholesterol numbers and statins?" So think about that for a moment. We'll come back to that here after we get through our benefits list. So fat-soluble vitamins.
Well, that's why they're called fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. They need fat to absorb. That's why they're called fat-soluble vitamins. And if we are taking our fat out of our diet, and generally when we have a low cholesterol diet, it's a low-fat diet, or it's a low cholesterol and bad fat diet. Like there is no such thing as, a lot of the healthy, stable fats have cholesterol in them. And so A, D, E, and K, and we're seeing epidemic deficiencies in vitamin D across the board. I work a lot with breast cancer clients in recovery once they've been diagnosed and really kind of help them, but really any cancer clients. And I have yet, not one occasion, had I always get people's vitamin D levels and look at that. There's never been one person without exception that I've seen that had optimal vitamin D levels at the time of diagnosis. And vitamin D is from the sun, but it's also tied with cholesterol. So as we're seeing our cholesterol levels go down as a nation, we're also seeing vitamin D deficiencies increase. And so vitamin D deficiencies is tied with cancer, is tied with multiple autoimmune diseases such as multiple sclerosis and all the rest. Vitamin D is also tied to depression and anxiety. And so, healthy vitamin D level, or if you have unhealthy vitamin D levels, you tend to, there's a connection there. And we're seeing again, increases in depression and anxiety. It's all tied together. And as we strip out the cholesterol, all of these other things are being thrown out of balance. And now we're seeing the symptoms of all those.
The interesting thing is that there's actually a number of studies that support exactly what you just said. In fact, A, D, E, and K are the 4 vitamins that show up on vitamin deficiencies all across our nation. And yet we've put all this emphasis on these low-fat diets. And the clue is in fat-soluble vitamin. The clue is if you're on a low-fat diet, you're doing everything to reduce the cholesterol and fat in your diet. You're probably not going to be able to successfully absorb any of these 4 nutrients to the extent that your body requires them. Interesting piece. We live in the Pacific Northwest, where we have a fair bit of rain here in the winter months. January.
Send some down here.
December, January, February, I think we get 50% of our rain in those 3 months. And so there can be a lot of months where there's no rain at all. The first year that we were here 4 years ago, my wife being very savvy about that and recognizing that, hey, we're not getting any sun anymore, immediately started putting vitamin D supplementing into our diet. But I have friends, friends of family and et cetera, that I know who suffer from depression, especially during those months. And in fact, there's a friend of the family who moved out of here and went to Arizona because she couldn't stand that mood swing that happened during the winter months and our rainy seasons here, and probably never recognizing that it was a vitamin D deficiency.
And there are other reasons as well that are tied to the sun, because it does bring life to you, but vitamin D is a huge one. you're not getting that from the sun, and when your vitamin D is low, you tend to be more anxious and more depressed. The other thing that we didn't mention, and I haven't mentioned to you even when we were just talking, is that the one vitamin that I don't think gets enough press or whatever is vitamin K. And vitamin K2 is essential for calcium, vitamin D, and magnesium for strong bones. And so if we have a low-fat diet, cholesterol-free diet, where the vitamin K2 is not being utilized for bone strength, and again, we're seeing an increase in osteoporosis. And this new osteopenia thing is really, we should talk about that at some point, about it's kind of a marketing kind of thing, but osteoporosis is a true issue, and it is on the rise. But you need a healthy vitamin K level, which is grounded in cholesterol and fat to have healthy bone structure.
There are various organs in the body to which cholesterol is really critical, and there's various organs that are involved in cholesterol and fat. Let's talk about the gallbladder just a little bit, and maybe some of your thoughts for people who may have had gallbladder surgery.
So for those people who don't know, just an overview, the gallbladder is a little, almost like a bag. It's very small, and it sits close to the liver. When the liver makes bile, the liver makes the bile, the gallbladder stores the bile. Okay, bile is a substance that breaks down and emulsifies fat. So the bile holds, and the liver does over 400 functions, probably even more than that, and bile production is one of them. Well, when the gallbladder is removed, let me see, how can I say this? It puts stress on the liver because the liver then needs to make the bile on demand. So bile is made, bile, when it's working properly, when we have our gallbladder, bile is made when the liver has time to make bile, and then is stored in the gallbladder.
Right.
Okay? So that way, when you eat fat, the gallbladder is spurred out by a hormone that releases the bile to break down the fat. Okay. If the gallbladder is removed, then the liver now needs to make and manufacture that bile on demand, which puts stress on the liver. So people had their gallbladders removed and can live a full life, but it puts more stress on the liver. And oftentimes people have their gallbladder removed find that shortly afterwards they'll eat a fatty meal and they are in the bathroom within 5 minutes because it literally, that fat doesn't emulsify and it literally just goes, and they are off to the bathroom. And until they learn to manage those symptoms, it can be a real problem. So one of the ways, and oftentimes doctors don't mention this, they'll remove your gallbladder and say, that's great, you did great for the surgery, we'll see you back in a year, and not give you any idea that now the liver needs extra support to take some stress off it, but also to help with those bathroom runs. So there is a thing you can take, like bile support, you can take liver support that helps with all of that. But the point being is that people who have their gallbladders removed don't emulsify fat as well as people who don't. Therefore, they are at risk for fat-soluble vitamin deficiency, and that all ties in with cholesterol. That's why.
So how critical is a proper cholesterol level in the body, meaning having enough cholesterol? How critical is that to maintaining a healthy gallbladder to begin with?
It's not, gallbladder is more general fat than it is specific to cholesterol, but I felt it was important to bring up because of people who have that removed need to be aware of how it works. I would love to do maybe a whole show on gallbladder health because there are some misconceptions about a low-fat diet will help your health of your gallbladder, but in a nutshell, what can happen if people have gallbladder issues, they get stones, and it can be dangerous, it can be life-threatening, and some people need to have it taken out. But oftentimes doctors will put people on a no-fat or low-fat diet for their gallbladder health. Well, the gallbladder spurts out this bile, okay? And if there's no fat that stimulates that, then the bile gets thicker and makes stones. And if it's never used, like I'm trying to think, I'm a terrible mechanic, but I'm sure something in the car, if oil is never used or some kind of a fluid is never ever moved, it gets thick and sludgy. So if you're never eating fat that stimulates the gallbladder to be used, it gets thick and sludgy. And that's when the low fat diet can actually cause gallbladder issues. But again, I would love to do a whole show on gallbladder and liver health and how they're tied together.
Well, this next point is actually going to tie back into Alan's question a little bit about cholesterol numbers and statins. I want to make and this is the direction I'm going here is really the importance of cholesterol to brain function. I want to share with you, though, a couple other problems that come from that I've heard associated with statins and other ways of using medication to artificially lower the cholesterol response in the body. I've heard many doctors say that the consequence of statins or cholesterol reducing drugs is either heart attack or stroke. I might add to that Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. I'm curious what your thoughts are of the importance of cholesterol to brain function, and do you believe there's a connection there between the other cognitive kinds of diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's?
Your questions can be so loaded. So there's a lot of questions there. I want to address, I think it was Alan's question first, and then I will get to the brain function. That is statin drugs and heart disease. When we're off here, I have another little interview I need to do, but at some point today, I will get you a study that recently came out that shows that statin drugs this is the question, and actually I think I have it on my Facebook page just from the other day, so I'll find it again. But basically it's, what's the right question to ask at your doctor? Do statin drugs lower cholesterol? They do. But the real question to ask is, will a statin drug extend my life?
That's the better question.
That's the better question. And so we're marketed into asking the wrong question from the doctor, or the doctor's providing us, or the drug manufacturers providing us with the wrong information for we assume that somehow lower cholesterol levels give us longer life, but there's studies now that are coming out again and again and again that show it does not. So statin drugs do lower the number, but that doesn't have anything to do with life expectancy. So that answers that question. Second thing is about cholesterol in the brain. Our brain is made of, if you took out the water, the liquid part, and just measured the mass part of it, the vast majority is made with fat. And there are portions of the brain that are up to 80% cholesterol. There's all sorts of different, the brain has so many different areas of different things that go on, but there are parts that are literally almost all cholesterol. And when you lower that so much, and I give this example now, this is not scientific, whatever, but it's a word picture more than anything else. So Alzheimer's is protein sticky strands. We hear amyloid plaques. It's sticking together of protein in the brain. Right. So I want you to imagine that you're frying a piece of chicken breast that is white with no fat on it whatsoever. Okay, so now you're putting this piece of chicken breast on the pan because it's low fat, or very low fat anyway, and you're warming it up and but it's sticking. Now, what do you put in the pan to prevent the protein from sticking?
I would put a fat or oil in there. As
do most people. I mean, what else? You wouldn't put flour, you wouldn't put anything, you'd put fat, you'd put butter or oil of some kind, or some kind of, like bacon doesn't stick because it has fat in it. So you don't need to put fat. So fat keeps protein from sticking. Well, and I know this is really just a word picture, but when we have Alzheimer's, we have sticky proteins. And yet we've seen cholesterol levels go down, the numbers in our country since the 1950s, but heart disease has not changed, and Alzheimer's has skyrocketed. Take a scientist to realize that cholesterol is in the brain for a reason. So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, so how about cholesterol numbers? Because everybody's throwing out these numbers of saying, well, your cholesterol should be between X, and yet we I shared right in the beginning, I've always been intrigued by these populations of people who have significantly higher cholesterol numbers and yet very low incidences of heart disease, stroke, etc. So what are your thoughts on actual cholesterol numbers?
Cholesterol numbers really have nothing to do with life expectancy, and they are set by the people who manufacture cholesterol drugs. Just like within about 6 months ago, the blood pressure drug numbers had been lowered, so more people will qualify for blood pressure medications. You know, cholesterol numbers were like 250 was considered normal, like in the 1970s, and that was lowered to 220. And now I don't know exactly, but I think it's like 200 or 180 or something. And they just keep getting lower and lower, so more people can qualify for statin drugs.
You know, what's interesting about the cholesterol number is that I remember years ago when I actually hired both a fitness coach and a nutritional coach, and this was back in the early 80s. And of course, this nutritional coach believed very strongly in this low-fat diet. In fact, went through our cupboards and looked at everything we had that had, you know, contained really any kind of fat, and took us grocery shopping, and we went and found all these either no fat or low fat alternatives to them. So we thought we were doing great, and I was like so proud of myself when my cholesterol was like 124 or 130 and thinking that's amazing. And now today I'm going, thank goodness I got beyond that nonsense, because interestingly enough, Jody, I met, and I won't mention her name because she's actually a pretty well-known person, but I met her probably I was 25, 26 years old. I followed her dietary advice all the way till the day that I was 35, and a doctor told me I had rheumatoid arthritis. And I went, I probably need to do something else. And by making changes and adjustments, and I can honestly say I do almost nothing that she taught me from my 20s. And the interesting part is, there's a little background. When people say, when I say she's a well-known person, I don't want to mention her name because I'm not trying to discredit her or anything like that. Yeah. But she's a nutritional coach who works with people who compete for Mr. Olympia. So you'd go, that's somebody who should really know their stuff, or you'd think they would really know their stuff. And all she was doing is giving me this advice that you see in the, you know, mainstream medical industry. And
I'm not blaming her. I'm not blaming anybody who follows that advice, because I have a bachelor's and a master's in dietetics and food science, and that is what I learned. I mean, what I learned in school didn't really relate to real people's health. So it's not like it's her fault or a doctor's. We were taught wrong. We were taught because, you know, big food manufacturers had come in and influenced educators and, you know, universities. And I remember sitting in class one time, I will never forget, I was front row, second seat from the left. A brand new book we got, you know, we all had textbooks then, nothing online because I'm old. Anyway, opened it up, and it was sponsored by the dairy industry. And I would think I was 20 or something, 21 maybe. And even at that young age, I thought, I wonder why the dairy industry is sponsoring my book that I had to pay whatever, you know, $100 for at the time. They're going to sponsor, just give it to me for free. But they didn't. I had to buy it, but it was sponsored by the dairy industry. And you know, once I got out of school, I don't know how long that continued. I know it's not allowed anymore, but it was.
Before we get done, then we're going to share with people maybe some tips on what to do, because you talk about all these benefits of cholesterol. And if somebody is like on statins, or their doctors have put them on any cholesterol reducing drugs, well, I'm going to give you an opportunity to kind of back that up from the beginning and go, how can you prevent the cholesterol numbers, whatever they may be, from being a problem to your health whatsoever, and actually figuring out how to get cholesterol levels to where they properly support brain function, liver function, cellular health, all that kind of good stuff. So the last category that we spoke of here, and I want to make sure that you get an opportunity to cover, is depression. This is huge. How important is cholesterol and fat to managing depression?
Again, you know, and I don't think we need to go into much detail, because we've talked about brain health and we've talked about fat soluble vitamins, both having to do with depression. Both of those things, the brain is, based on all of those nutrients, doesn't run on nothing. And so, cholesterol is an essential nutrient, or a non-essential nutrient, because your body makes it. But if we see, I have a friend, she actually lives in Portland, and she has 2 teenage daughters, both in high school. One of her and they moved from India. They've been here about 5 years. And when this daughter started high school at the local high school, they had been here about 2 years. She took a huge dive in her depression. I mean, went from being a normal, healthy, active, vivacious young woman to extremely depressed, suicidal. So her mother knew enough, of course, to take her to the doctor, took her both to a medical doctor and a naturopathic doctor. And the naturopathic doctor said, let's check her cholesterol level. Her cholesterol level was so low, it was one of the lowest ever recorded for whatever, I don't even know what the reason was, but that was the reason that spurred on her. That was her underlying cause of her depression. It wasn't because of the move, it wasn't any of that stuff. It was literally a physical reason. And so they got her cholesterol levels up, and she is doing other things as well, I know, and I know she's doing really well now, but that was eye-opening to her mom, who also is, works with me often. That cholesterol is directly tied to depression. So again, we look at statin drugs lowering these numbers and, reducing the way our body utilizes cholesterol or where it goes. And we also see an increase in depression. And is there a relationship there? So anyway, I just needed to share that story, because that's something that might, if somebody has severe onset of depression, that might be something that they want to get checked.
So then what does somebody do? So we've talked about 6 different significant benefits of cholesterol, and this list could be 300 items long, right? But these are some significant ones. Somebody who's sitting out there who's maybe on cholesterol reducing drugs, or another really quick situation, because some of it's just bad information, but there are also people who look at these various challenges that they may personally have, and I'm just going to put it this way, they'll use them as an excuse for not doing things properly to begin with, to deal with. So let's take somebody who's maybe twice a healthy body weight, a relatively lethargic person who says, well, I have diabetes on top of, my overweight problem, but I can't do anything to fix this or fix my cholesterol problem or anything else because of my diabetes. Or maybe somebody is saying, I have a history of heart disease, and, I've had all these family members who have died of heart attacks or strokes, etc. And so, that's why, I also have to, do these various cholesterol reducing drugs, etc. So these people are having all these symptomatic things that come out of not doing nutrition correctly, in my opinion. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I'm saying that. They have all these problems that come out of not taking care of themselves to begin with. So if somebody's dealing with a cholesterol-related problem, why are they having it? And maybe taking a couple back steps, could you explain what they could be doing then to manage that in a better way than maybe statins and or all the other drugs they might be taking?
Absolutely. And I do want to say that I am not giving medical advice. I want you to go to your doctor. So let's just start there, because it's not specific to anybody. Just want to give general advice. So one of the underlying causes of everything you mentioned is a processed, high sugar, high refined fat, which is the bad fats that cause inflammation. So when we see sugars, they spike blood sugar levels. Blood sugar initiates an insulin response. Always does. When you have high insulin, you have high inflammation, causes type 2 diabetes, and type 1 is, I wish they had different names. Type 1 is an autoimmune, type 2 is a dietary, a result of diet problems. And the vast majority of the time, not every time, because sometimes the pancreas can be so damaged that it cannot be reversed. But the vast majority of time, type 2 diabetes can be reversed and literally have no symptoms whatsoever and get insulin levels within a normal range. And you mentioned, all of those different things, joint pain, all of those metabolic issues have an underlying cause of inflammation due to bad fats, which are vegetable oils, high sugar diets, high fructose corn syrup, and processed food. That's the underlying of all of those, is that. It's not cholesterol.
So I have a question for you. Being that you've made a commitment to good foods and raw foods and all these sorts of things, I'm curious if you ever are, if you're tempted to try somebody's, whether it be a processed food or off the shelf food. I'm curious that if you can actually taste some of the, when you look at the list of additives, the reason I'm asking this question, this is a little bit off topic, but I have noticed that, if you go over to a friend's place, my wife always makes this homemade chocolate that's made out of coconut oil and 100% cocoa and all that kind of good stuff. So if somebody has had like one of these little chocolate bars, and I was telling Kyle just the other day that I used to eat those things, 10, 12 of them at a time if I had one, years ago. And I tried one of those recently, and I was really kind of blown away that I used to think they were delicious, because now it tasted more like this waxy, I don't know, it didn't even taste like chocolate to me. And I was like, wow. So the thing is when you're talking about highly processed foods and somebody says, well, Jody's recommending a high-fat diet, or recommending, that fats are important. So they go out and get a bag of potato chips, which is high fats. Or they go and get one of these cheap chocolate bars, which is high fats. That's not at all what you're talking about.
And that goes back to a little bit about the keto diet question we had earlier. It's all about quality, and potato chips don't fall under that category. And
neither does the little Hershey chocolate bar.
Exactly. Well, I have to say, I still struggle with that wanting, and I'll say I still sometimes, I have some kind of an addiction to chocolate, and I struggle with that a lot. And it is something, even though I can talk a great talk, I want it like anybody else. It's not like that doesn't go away for me. And the other thing I really struggle with is breakfast cereals. There's been times that you come home, oh, there's nothing to eat, and here's a easy bowl of cereal. Well, every once in a while I'm like, no, that's not a good option for you, Jody. You can't do that. So it's not that they go away, but when you do then have those things, they don't taste as good as you remembered, because real food tastes better than processed food. And when you move to the real food side, real great eggs that are from chickens in your neighbor's yard, and, real vegetables cooked in healthy fats, the flavors with good spices is 10 times what processed food is.
Oh, agreed.
It's hard to explain unless you've experienced it.
The interesting part is Kyle here is 19 years old, is in the time of life in which somebody has every opportunity to experience optimum health, right? Yeah, absolutely. And he mentioned to me recently, because he's been over doing some painting and various things over at our place, and he mentioned to me just recently that he said, you know what, when I eat here, I feel so much better. And the foods that we make Steph does everything from whether it's our vegetables, whether it's meats, it doesn't matter what it is. Steph is always looking at, is this a balanced meal? Does it have the nutrients you're looking for? All that kind of stuff. And Kyle, have you yet to have a meal at our home where it didn't taste like it was prepared like a gourmet chef? I mean, it's amazing how good the food is.
Yeah, and sadly, I've been kind of slacking off the keto diet so much. I'm basically at like square one again, and my left knee is acting up, and it really sucks. And it's when you do the keto diet, or you do a diet, especially the keto one, you start feeling better, but you don't really notice that. But when you get off it, you definitely notice that. I'm definitely noticing that I'm not feeling as good as I used to. So that's a heads up.
And to Jody's point earlier, the healthy keto diet, not the junk food keto diet. So don't just think of fat as a fat, because it's not. And there's probably just as many or more bad fats out there as there are good ones.
There's more.
Yes, yes. Way more ways to make bad choices with fats than there are good ones. No question about it. Anything else that you want to share with our listening audience? Before you answer that question, though, I do want to read a comment from one of our viewers. Pamela says, Jody is awesome. I've learned a lot from your shows with her. Please thank her for us.
Thank you. That means a lot. I don't even, it's hard to see who's, yeah, thank you.
So anything you'd like to say in summary about cholesterol and the importance of cholesterol to overall human health?
Nothing that we haven't talked about, just that, it's keeping down inflammation will address the heart issue that we think cholesterol and heart issues and stroke. Keeping down inflammation, according to the American Dietetic Association, deep within their little notes there, is probably the #1 way that we can keep our heart healthy. And then cholesterol keeps everything else in check. So, it's really nothing. But before you make any changes, you do need to check with your doctor, because you don't want to make those changes on your own, and, discuss these things with him or her, because those are, again, you can come off of some of these things, slowly make those changes first, and then go and say, I've made these changes. What do you think of me coming off of this medication? So, you have to do your part before you go and tell your doctor you're making those changes too.
Okay, so one last comment. A question is, can we share 5 good fats, good fats, recommended fats for people? I'm going to put 2 out there that have actually snuck into almost everything we eat these days, and that is the unrefined organic coconut oil. We use it regularly in our diet. And another one is avocado. Those 2 are two quality fat sources which show up in our diet regularly. You've mentioned some others. Jody, what are some of your favorite fats?
Grass-fed butter is probably my favorite, just because it's, it's easy and it's available. Ghee is another one that a lot of people like, because the protein of the butter is taken out, or the milk part, and just the healthy fat is left. And you can get that at Trader Joe's, or Whole Foods, or even some grocery stores have a really good ghee. And the other is fats from animals that are, but not industrial animals. So, and again, this is a whole nother topic for another show about glyphosate and pesticides in fat. In fact, just one really quick note: if people can only afford organic, either vegetables or meats, choose the organic meats, because fat holds toxins more than a vegetable holds toxins. And so if you're going to eat healthy fats from animals, those animals need to either be grass-fed, pastured, or wild-caught. So like wild-caught salmon rather than a grain-fed salmon. But that's another healthy fat choice, is a good quality animal fat.
And those kinds of, great cuts or good quality fats, good quality meats, there are so many people, that I even personally know, and if you don't know somebody, you can do some digging around, but who raise healthy cattle that are out on, fed out on the fields, and have really good organic diets. They aren't, pumped full of all kinds of hormones, etc. That the quality meats to that extent are not that difficult to find at all. And for people who share with me that that to eat a healthy diet is so expensive and I can't afford to do that, and that's why poor people are eating these junk food diets. And I mean, there's a certain amount of validity to that if you're going to say it right out of the gate, that if you tried to change your diet today from your junk food diet to this so-called healthy diet, that you might be spending more money should you make that transition from today to tomorrow. But I would say this. My wife will tell you this. She's the one who manages the budget when it comes to groceries and what we actually spend on food. And with 2 little girls in the house, that was not true 4 years ago. So the same 2 adults and 2 little girls in the house, our grocery bill is about the same or slightly less than it was years ago. And eating much, much better food than we ever did before. And interestingly enough, is as those good quality fats came back into our diet, if you look at how many calories are in 1 gram of fat versus how many calories are in 1 gram of carbohydrates, you'll understand why you're also eating less food too.
And I think we've talked about that, the fire, the log, the example of the campfire, and how fat is more satiating than carbs or proteins even. Proteins are important too, but yeah, fats are really, they're 9 calories per gram, and the other 2 are 4 calories per gram. And so they keep you fuller longer. So.
And I would add that your energy levels also change too. You get a more constant energy all day long.
Exactly. It's more even, and that's really important for people, so they're not doing this.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's it.
All right. Well, thanks, Jody. Fantastic information. As Pam said, thanks to you for joining us here on the broadcast. There's tons and tons of valuable information. And thanks, Alan, for your excellent questions today. I see that we were helpful to you. He says thanks as well. And thank you to everybody else who joined us here on this special broadcast on Northwest Digital News. I'm Kevin Hunter with Kyle Torgerson and Jody Summers out of Northern California. Until next time, take care.